Boom, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's Vaughan here with DancerAF. What? I have an amazing guest for you today, Will Centurion. I'll give you a quick little bio on him, then we're going to jump right into the content. You're going to want to stick around for this because he is an expert on mindset and health, wellness, I suppose, for performing artists. So meet Will. He's an Australian mental health and mindset coach who focuses on working exclusively with performing artists. Perfect for this podcast. He is passionate about providing emerging professionals the strategies to succeed both on and off the stage. Will has an industry-informed approach to psychology, developing workshops and masterclasses that improve audience resilience, stage confidence, career mindset, and stress management. That sounds awesome to me. As a performer, his international Australian credits include Saturday Night Fever, We Will Rock You, AIDA, we call this AIDA in our world, So You Think You Can Dance 2010, West Side Story, A Chorus Line, The King and I, The Lion King, Aladdin, and In the Heights. As a practitioner, Will consults on major theatre productions such as Magic Mike Live, Australia, Come From Away, Moulin Rouge, Hairspray, and Miss Saigon, as well as targeting performing arts institutions across Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, where he's actually joining me from today. Now, you may also be familiar with such names as the Royal Academy of Dance, Australian National Ballet, TAFTA, the Ministry of Dance, and Brent Street, and many others. Woof! Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Will Centurion. How are you?
Thanks so much, Vaughan. This is awesome. The production value on this is insane. Insane. So I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, loving it already. I actually have to ask you, I've got a question that's been bugging me. Yeah, what animal best describes your dancing and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'd say a squirrel.
A squirrel.
A squirrel. Yeah, I have a lot of energy. It's taken a lot of work to keep that energy grounded and anchored. But yeah, always just looking, observing, learning, trying to sort of get in there. So yeah, a very centered squirrel. Let's
A
say that.
scented squirrel. So that
Yeah.
reminds me of Over the Hedge, right? Where you've got, have you seen Over the Hedge? It's a great cartoon
Yes. Yeah.
movie where that
Yeah.
crazy squirrel, he slows down when he
Yeah.
has coffee or caffeine,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. I knew we'd get on. I relate. I relate to that. I feel like, oh, shiny object. Off we
Yeah.
go. So I wanted to ask the background that in which you come from. So the world I'm from, ballroom dancing. The world you're from in
Hmm.
the performing arts world, which is great, by the way. I saw The Lion King. Um, you may
Oh,
not have been in
cool.
that particular production, but the actual production value, the musical itself, oh wow, wow. So I'm very keen to know a lot about what goes on for you personally, and also in your mind, how you've prepared, how you've also got to where you are, and that's going to be something we'll deep dive into. But I guess
Hmm.
what I really find interesting with people is like, what was like one of the more darker moments for you where I suppose you found like you're either feeling despair or
Hmm.
you're wondering like, is this something I actually want to do? And it was just like one of those sort of coming to Jesus moments, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a moment like that that you can recall and like how that felt?
Yeah, absolutely. That for me was what sort of sent me towards the mental health sector. For me, it was a lot of shame. So
Really?
forgetting lines, I felt a lot of shame. Forgetting lyrics, missing entrances. Like when you're understudying roles or you're playing principal roles in the show, it's a lot of pressure, and breaking or cracking under that pressure used to send me into some quite severe shame spirals. So yeah, one I can recall so vividly was in Aladdin. When I was doing the production of Aladdin, I was on for Kasim, which is one of the three friends, and I completely blanked in one of the numbers. I stood on stage, the music kept going. I was looking at the other actors, they were looking at me. Thank God I was with two incredibly professional performers who were able to sort of pick up the ball, and we finally got back on track and delivered the song. But I left that performance in such a deep shame spiral because it's very much that thing of like, if I'm good, this shouldn't be happening to me. If I am professional, this shouldn't be happening to me at my level. with my experience, this shouldn't be happening to me. So
Does that
that's
actually
been my
happen?
experience.
Does that actually happen with many performers, I suppose, at your at that level? So
Of course it
yeah,
does.
yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, of course it does. It happens to performers on every level. I think the way we deal with it is different. And I wish I had the coping skills that I have now. I wish I had that when I was in the industry, because I think I would have been a lot more resilient than how I was.
Yeah, I think that can be something a lot of people can relate to is that feeling of shame and when you forget something, not like forgetting your
Hmm.
keys. Like this is a whole different ball game because
This is
I've
in
had
front of 2,000 people.
oh yeah, yeah, and I guess in parallel to that with ballroom dancing, once you reach a certain level, you just learn to
Mhm.
mask your mistakes really well. But like you're
Yeah.
making them, or you're forgetting choreography, or you're not you're elevating yourself to this trying to be perfect, but which doesn't exist, and then you do
Hmm.
forget things. But the professionals know how to come back from that in the moment
Yeah.
and
Yep.
learn to also not take it personally. So we'll go into that in a minute, which will be really, really cool. But
Mm.
how do you, what actually happens? So when you're on stage, you forget something. The other performers pick up the slack, so to speak, or they come in and they ad lib, like to keep things going, so no
Yeah.
one notices. Like what actually happens in that
Yeah.
moment? You're trying not to like die, right? So
Yeah, I wanted the ground to swallow me up. So the lead up to it was that I got a note from the resident director to apply in the song that I was about to do, and so there's a short scene that introduces the song, and I applied the note in the scene, and it worked. And I think I it took me out of like the position that I was in, because my mind was like, oh wow, this actually worked. And then the music started, and the song is such fast tempo that there's no room for error. So because I was kind of caught off guard, I stumbled over a few words, and then I barely got a sentence through, and I completely blanked. Like that was my survival response, was just to kind of shut down. And the orchestra doesn't wait, so the music kept going. And as I said, like, thank God I was with another two performers on stage who could pick up the ball. But yeah, for me it was trying to overcome that shutdown response
mm,
and trying to get back into the performance, and it just felt like it was forever. But these scenarios happen because it is live theater, and it happens to the best of us. But it's not a nice experience when
mm,
you're in it.
are you talking about the fight, flight, freeze response? That type of
Yes.
sort of is it the limbic system, right? When you've just got this
Yeah. Yeah.
instant animal response kick in, and so
Yeah.
you've trained, but then you hit that response. So what is a way? Because every performer, dance, stage,
Mm-hmm.
singing, forgets lines, mistakes happen. The pros know how to
Mm-hmm.
cover it to as they should, but that doesn't prevent the issue, right? So in real time, what are some things that you can find help you, or is there a way you train for that? Like, what can you
Yeah.
actually do?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing in those situations is to remain connected to the story, because that fight or flight response has the capacity to take you out of it, or even a flop response, which is what I sort of went through, where I shut down. So by remaining connected to the story, and that is like that's an athlete's mindset. That is mental resilience, to be able to remain connected to the story even through a crisis. You will find your way back in. You will find your flow again. You'll be able to sort of pick up the ball. So the skill is to kind of train yourself to remain attached and remain connected, even if there's a part of you that wants to sort of kick and scream and run for the hills.
So are there people? So do you find this a common thing that you actually have to address when you're dealing with whether they're like? So just give the audience a bit of background on the people you do train, like the types of
Yeah,
where they are level wise, also to to the level you also teach to, that sort of thing, so people can understand how to, I suppose, practically start to think in a way. Because I like
yeah,
there's gonna be some really good takeaways for people here, and I want it to be for people to understand sort of where you're coming from.
yeah. So for emerging professionals, a lot of that remaining connected to the performance is just having your nervous system flexible, having your breathing engaged, as opposed to getting swept away with that self talk of like, this shouldn't be happening. I can't believe this happened. Oh my God, I'm a failure. They're never going to forget this. And then suddenly you're not in the story anymore. So it's just, I guess, training yourself to go, okay, this happened. I'm just going to take a breath and I'm going to remain connected to what's happening here because that's the most important thing, is to keep moving forward as opposed to sort of going into a bubble or going into a cave. With performers, like with professional level performers, it's, I think, a trust in the space and a trust in the environment and maybe a trust in the partner that you're working with, that they will help you. They will allow you, give you the support that you need in order to get back into the groove, or to get back into the story. So it's that thing of like self regulation and co regulation. How do we apply the two?
Okay, so because I was just looking here. I actually took a lot of notes when you were speaking. So I'm briefly met Will at the Dance Teachers Expo recently, and last week I had Rebecca on the podcast. So check that out. We were talking more about the studio owner operation side of things. But what I liked
Mm-hmm.
about you was your approach to how to deal with the mental side of performance, which again, this is the reason I have this podcast, and half of my YouTube channel is dedicated to the mindset, because my background as a coach as well, and being certified
Yep.
in that side, it is just really not talked about a lot. Yet it is the governing
Mhm.
way of doing things, right? So like how you think
Yeah.
is going to manifest in,
Yep.
I suppose, beliefs and behaviors, and then that's going to have a huge outcome on what you do with your skill or talent or lack thereof, right? And so your ability to actually build the talent, right? So
Mhm.
what are I suppose, let's look at you personally. Like, so when did you first discover sort of like your love of dancing, like your first or performance, so to speak? When did that sort of aha
Yeah.
epiphany happen for you?
I think for me it was cultural. So I'm Latin American, and we grew up with a lot of tango. We grew
You'd
up
be
with a lot
good
of
at that. I was gonna
salsa.
say, some what's up? Please,
Yeah, we
yeah.
used to, like, there was Latin clubs on the weekends, and but dancing wasn't anything that I professionally trained in. I kind of had a passion for it or a love for it, but I don't come from a performing arts family. I don't come from a family that has any attachment to the entertainment industry. They're all about sort of education and financial stability. So yeah, it was kind of a bit of a dream that I finally decided to take seriously when I turned 18. So 18 was when I first started training. I auditioned and got accepted into Brent Street, and that was
Amazing.
sort of 12 months of, yeah, 12 months of technique and 12 months of learning style and 12 months of learning vocab. I didn't have the slightest idea of dance vocab.
What is dance
And then
vocab?
from
What is
there,
dance vocab?
yeah,
I've never
yeah,
even heard that
exactly,
term.
yeah,
I
yeah.
feel ashamed.
I mean,
What is
I
dance
used to
vocab?
like spin in the kitchen in my socks. I didn't know what a pirouette was. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Yeah. Oh, I
Like,
see, the
they were
the
just
the
spins.
lingo. Yeah.
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 Um, so from there, I finally decided to lean in deeper, and I did a diploma in dance, and that's what kickstarted my journey. So I had 3 years of training all up, which isn't a lot. But on those 3 years, I managed to build a 20-year career and
Mm.
learnt a lot along the way.
Did you have a lot of kickback, like I suppose resistance from your family, like when you were going
Absolutely.
into that? Like you're at a pinnacle, right? When you're 18, that's
Hmm.
quite a fork in the road for a lot of people, right? So they're
Yeah.
often pushed into studies or what their parents want. And so, what type of pushback or resistance did you have to meet or overcome?
Oh, huge. There was very, very little support for me wanting to pursue a career in the arts. I got my marks to get into uni. I was meant to become a teacher of sorts, and yeah, when I told my parents that I wanted to train in dance, they pushed back quite heavily. I was given a gap year. They were basically like, "Well, you just finished year 12. You've got a year where you can do whatever it is that you want." But then after that, it's get you better get back into uni again. And much to their disappointment, that's not the way that it ended up panning out. But they really didn't get on board, in all honesty, probably till I was about 30.
Wow, dude, how'd that make you feel?
Well, I think, yeah, there's a lot of feeling of abandonment. There's a lot of feeling of rejection. There's a lot of feeling of shame.
Mm.
There's a lot of feeling of isolation. But it's what I wanted. It's what I wanted for myself. So I wasn't going to take no for an answer. When they finally did get on board, which was when I came back to Australia to do West Side Story, I remember my mother crying at stage door after the show because she couldn't believe just the level of professionalism that I was at. She couldn't believe that I was sort of part of a Broadway production. And I had to say to my mum, like, thank you, I'm glad you're here now, but I've also been doing this for 10 years. It was so far away from their realm that you could actually have a career as a performer.
Wow. I mean, that's to go 12 years like that and definitely feel, you would definitely feel a feeling of isolation. So, like, how did you get that
Mm.
support? I mean, that's a long period of time to go into such an intense industry. This is not like going into uni and then going into a career mode where you just follow a pathway and overcome
Yeah.
normal day-to-day problems like that. It's so intense, actually. So
Hmm.
what support systems did you have in place for yourself? Like, what type of things did you do when you were lonely, right? Like when you were feeling like, my God,
Yeah.
like my family isn't like really understanding this, not really supporting me in this journey. The people you
Hmm.
thought would are not. So what were some of the things
Yeah.
that would help you get through that?
I think you choose your family. And
Mm.
so, my chosen family were the people that I danced with, the mentors or the teachers that inspired me. It's where I felt the safest. It's where I felt accepted. It's where I felt welcomed. So, yeah, you go where you feel you belong, or you go where you are wanted. And so, my dance community became my family for all that time. The people that I worked with in shows, the people that I trained with at school. It was a chosen family for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like that's amazing. My dad, when I said I wanted to go into the world of ballroom dancing, he was like, "Do you still like girls?" I was like,
Yeah,
"Yes, yeah,
yeah,
all right."
yeah,
I mean, it's a weird question, but he is a World War II
yeah,
baby, so but
yeah.
but and it was one of those. I suppose it's one of those classic things of that you've got to have. I think to you, even if you don't have it every day, you have to have some form of tremendous belief in yourself, or at least
Yeah,
the people around you, right? And what is happening,
yeah.
because you don't always have that within yourself. I know people talk about confidence, and you do have to have confidence, obviously, in whatever that means, and the skill of that, and the belief systems. But I don't know about you. I have a lot of self doubt, and I
Hmm.
haven't arrived at a place where that just doesn't exist anymore. Like, even for this, I feel you're allowed in a moment where I'm like, what do I say next? And it's
Yeah, of
very, you
course.
don't want that to overcome yourself, right, in the
Yep,
moment. And
yep.
so, do you have some tips for people to help with those, whether it's a belief system or whether it's a way of thinking or a way of training yourself, if you will? No one's around you
Hmm.
supporting you. You're going after what you want. It's really difficult. You may not be eating that much. You may not be earning very much. Opportunities, rejection, rejection, rejection. You keep
Yeah.
turning up and you get injured and then you have to recover, right? So, what are some fundamental things you found that help, especially as a coach now, that help people to sustain that journey?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to stay in your own lane. That to me is my golden motto.
What does that mean?
Um,
I mean, I
well,
know
I
what it
don't
means
look.
when I'm insulting someone,
Yeah,
but like,
yeah, yeah. Well, it's that thing of like my career's not going to look like anybody else's. The way I dance, sing, and act isn't going to look, sound, or feel like anybody else. The most important thing is me, my goal. My process to get there, my timeline, my approach. Staying in your own lane is where you do your best work. It's the moment that we start to compare, the moment that we sort of base our success off what someone else or what they think, is the moment that our journey begins to detour. So I think it's really great to be inspired by what other people are doing, and to have people that you look up to, but your lane is where you do your best work. So for me, starting at 18, having only trained for 3 years, and diving into sort of music theater in a sink or swim kind of situation, like staying in my own lane was my safety net, because there was no point in trying to be like anybody else.
so okay, so I love that because staying the way I'm hearing like staying in your own lane, and when I look at how people train from like a very beginner novice level to get up to an expert level, then to like a mastery
Hmm.
level, different stages of the process. You often hear within painting, for example, that one of the things you must do is emulate the masters to begin with. You copy
Right.
the brush strokes, you copy the pictures exactly as they are. You don't put anything on it. And then you would
Mm-hmm.
then take that painting once you've mastered the brush stroke or mastered the painting, and then you would start to make an iteration of it. You wouldn't make your own
Mm-hmm.
yet, and then you would learn to do your own sort of creative style out of mastering the master, so to speak. And I know
Right.
Pablo Picasso had a big problem with that, but he was also a once in a generation type artist. But so discounting those type of performers, right, and those type of masters, um, that process, right, like what you just discussed then, like staying in
Mm-hmm.
your own lane, do you find that there's a point where you do need to, like, the skill acquisition period has to happen, but then you have to
Mm-hmm.
switch it and be like, okay, I've got to start finding out who I am, what I'm about, what people are going to know me for, right? Because that's the risk, isn't it? Because you may
Right.
not sound like anyone else. Like, what's her name? Macy Gray. Oh my god, I'm gonna like make a fool of myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Macy, what's her last name?
Yes. Macy Gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, dude, like, come on, like you hear
I
that
think
voice.
she was told that she sounded like Minnie Mouse on helium or something like that. That's
Yeah,
literally what the
yeah.
record execs said to her.
I think Fred Astaire was told he can dance a little, right? In one of his
Right.
auditions, just a little, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that what do you think is a period where people can start to make that switch, so they can get the, I suppose, the confidence to start at being like, this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and sort of take that leap of faith, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you as I said, you borrow from the masters or you borrow from your teachers or mentors, those foundations that are going to support you and those foundations that are going to improve your own performance. But at the end of the day, it's the most valuable brand is the one that you build. It's one that's authentic. So take what's useful, but continue to evolve and continue to grow and continue to sort of keep moving forward in a way that when you step into a room, you are congruent, you are you. And that may not be as refined as somebody else, but that still adds value to that space and it's still good enough. And, like the idea of like you finally getting there, like I'm finally there as a professional, I'm finally there as a master. I think, I don't know, do we ever really get there? And if you stop long enough and say that to yourself, has ego and arrogance not kind of taken over?
Mm.
So, if the mindset is to continuously grow and evolve, then there really is no there. You might get a sort of glimpse of it at best, but it's about the next level and the next level and the next level.
I've definitely found that, and I remember one of my teachers who was in her 50s saying she dances better now than she ever has, and partly because she was training with the best in the world, but her knowledge base had
Hmm.
kept expanding so much over 2 decades of from retirement, that retirement point, that she
Yep.
was feeling better, and she was amazing to dance with, dude. Like, wow, she was
Wow.
just unbelievable to go around the room with and have a dance. And it was very
Wow.
inspiring. But she was like, I'm getting better and better. And it's not one of those, if I only knew this back then. It's also time, right? Like, it's just
Yep.
the acquisition of knowledge and the implementation
Yeah.
and the testing and experimenting and seeing what works. And I think that's really great for people to know, because the best performers I've met, typically speaking, they, everyone has ego and those sorts of things. So,
Hmm.
but I've definitely noticed that the best ones, the ones who are really good, often have that thirst, right? That curiosity to keep
Yep.
wanting to expand and
Yep.
wanting to get better and draw a little bit more out of themselves. And I've found the ones that aren't quite there, that are maybe more in the B category, are
Yep.
often the ones that are like the most conceited. Like, they're not very
Yep.
nice to talk to generally. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I
Yeah.
guess the attitude separation is very, very different, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say would be some things that, I mean, from the coach perspective, what would you
Yeah.
coach people on to be like, look, these are some fundamental maybe attitudes or habits that you want to develop that will give you the edge, because it's a competitive world, right? You have to have
Yeah.
your skills have to be super sharp, maybe, right? I don't know.
Yep.
You throw out what you think is the thing, but what is it that they need to adopt, right? To, give them that edge, get that
Yeah.
space, be the brand, and be like, you didn't like my voice,
Yeah.
now you do. What do they have to do?
This is going to go against what most people say, but I think the most valuable
Do it.
skill that a performer can have is the art of repair.
Ooh.
Not the art of not making mistakes, but the art of being able to repair when you do. I think that is like your superpower. If you know how to train that, that is an absolute superpower, because the idea of making mistakes is never making mistakes is going to slap you in the face, because eventually you will. But if you know that you've got the techniques, or you know, the confidence to be able to reboot, to be able to repair any kind of rupture, to be able to get back on board, to deal with any mistake or any kind of vulnerability that comes your way, and not to mask it, but to almost sort of integrate it into what it is that you do and move forward from that, I think that kind of a performer is absolutely unstoppable.
I like that because that speaks a lot to the ability to handle rejection, to
Hmm.
have resilience built in,
That's
right?
it.
So, what, I mean, I think do you teach a workshop on rebooting and repairing?
Yes.
Is that right? And
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. Yep.
so what are some of the things that people have to do to repair, right? Like what are some of
Yeah.
the things that you go that, and you've noticed that students who've done it gone, oh my God, Will, you're amazing. That was the shit. I need to do that.
Yeah.
That thing.
It's coming back from, it's learning how to come back from disappointment. It's learning how to come back from rejection, learning how to come back from grief and loss. Because when we
Mm,
want a contract, or we want a job, or we want a win, or we want a competition and it doesn't happen, that is, you know, like losing something that you love or someone that you love. So it's learning how to come back from all of that. And, you know, simple things that people can do is, um, to probably stop asking themselves, like, what is the purpose of this pain, and start asking themselves, how can I find some purpose from this pain?
mhm.
So it's shifting from like, oh, why did this happen to me? There must be a reason for it, to going, let me find a reason to move forward.
So do you?
So yeah,
Is that like a, or, a lot of people talk about like a victim mindset, but like this, why did this happen to me thing?
yep,
It
yep,
seems very negative, like not a good way to talk to yourself, I would imagine.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so you're saying
So
that
finding some purpose from your pain means accepting a rejection as part of your career or as part of your journey.
mm,
Accepting a disappointment, accepting the feeling of grief and loss as part of your experience, and finding meaning in it, working out how you can kind of integrate that to continue moving forward. And, you know, let's say you're in a competition and you got cut. Yeah. The difference there, the art of repair, is being able to say to yourself, okay, I have some choices here. I'm going to step back into the arena again at whatever, you know, opportunity I have, and I'm going to prove the naysayers wrong. That's a motivation. I'm going to prove the supporters right. That's a motivation. Or I'm going to be a transitional character, which means that I'm about to rewrite the rules. It's very sort of what's his name, Paul Mercurio in Strictly Ballroom. Yeah,
thank you,
um,
thanks for the
yeah,
quote.
that's it. Yeah, but it's, you know, it's about finding a reason to step back in, and if you're cut from a comp, you know, and your personality leans into, I'm going to do prove the naysayers wrong.
I love
The
that.
next opportunity I get, yeah, I'm going to prove the naysayers wrong.
See, that's good because a lot of the times people look at a professional someone and think, oh, they've got it easy, they've got the talent, they get all these opportunities. They don't realize how many scars are like on them from turning up in the
Oh, there's
arena.
so
Oh,
much trauma in our industry. Yep.
and well, yeah. Let's talk to that. I something I was mentioning yesterday that this is sound a bit strange, but in the marketing space, like in the space where you're selling stories, you're in a character in any story, right? That we all know and love. Doesn't matter what journey they're following, whether it's a hero's journey, like an underdog story. There are sort of three things at play all the time, right? There's the external battle, there's the internal
Hmm.
struggle, right, or beliefs about
Hmm.
themselves, their narrative, and then of course there's the overarching philosophy of what they think about it, which I think is great because it
Wow.
perfectly attributes itself to the art of repair, dealing with
Yep.
disappointment and grief, because the internal narrative of why is this happening to me versus why this happens for me is
Yep.
very important. The external thing you often can't control, like how a judge likes you or a director likes you or not. You can't really
Yes.
control that, right? But we try to control that, but that's not
Yeah.
very healthy. But on
Yeah.
the inside, we can at least make better choices. And then the overarching philosophy, which is sort of what relates to the what you were saying about like a purpose, right? Like about how this can benefit
Spot
you
on.
is great, right? Because I love talking about having a philosophy for failure. Like, so when it happens, you understand and apply that philosophy to the thing that's happened, because you're gonna make mistakes, right?
Wow.
So whether you want to call it failure or not is a different thing. That's a philosophical thing, right? But you will need some guiding principle for that to be at
Yes.
play, because if you truly want to go after something big that is way out of your realm, that you're not quite
Yep.
qualified yet for, and you want to keep turning up to do it, you have to have those at place. And I think they're
Mm.
almost, I mean, you can challenge me on this if you want, but I think it's almost more important to have that right than the skills being absolutely the best in the world.
Yeah.
Because I think if
Yes.
you turn up more than the
Yep.
person who's more talented, you'll actually put yourself in a position ahead of them eventually.
That's it. It's spot on. I honestly don't think you could have put it better. That was the thing about me. I was never the best dancer, never the best singer, never the best actor in the room. Yet I worked non-stop for 20 years, because I played to the strengths that I did have, because I continued to show up, because I was likable. That was a huge one
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
Um, and I was willing to learn and willing to grow, even with my inadequacies. So it's not always about the best talent is the one that wins the race. I think it's the most consistent performer, the one with the most grit, the one that's willing to stand the length of the game.
Oh yeah, you've coming into a subject where I just sort of obsessed like about human excellence, so to speak, in performance, because talent is a interesting one, particularly in dancing, because often you get the common thing someone will say to you is, "Oh, you must have started at a young age, and or you must
Yep.
be naturally talented." It's like, oh my god, you clearly haven't seen my early days of dancing for like
Yep.
12 years, where it was just horrible, and even today, like, still needs so much work. And that's what people don't understand is how much we kept showing up versus everyone who was better than us, who couldn't actually keep a
Right.
partnership, which makes you, not go anywhere in board dancing because you need someone to dance
Yep.
with. And then, or they would stop competing for a year, and then they would drop down in skill, or they would swap teachers a lot, and then that actually puts you backwards because you're not developing with the coach, right? So
Yep.
I really want people to understand this. And you can see it in singing very often with top 40 singers. It's like, does that number one really mean they're the best in the world? Like, does Dan Brown's Da
True.
Vinci Code mean it is the work of art, the best literature piece ever written in history? What? Because Harry Potter
Yep.
sold the most books next to the Bible. Does that make it the best piece of work? No,
Yeah.
you're joking, right? Like, there's actually much better, well written books than that. But that's what people hear, and they think that's what makes you good. Um,
Hmm.
and it's not. It's not actually that. So let's talk about talent, because this is a big subject that's quite contentious. And I know in performing arts, it's something people often use as an excuse, right, to not better themselves. It's like, so
Yes.
what do you think about talent? I suppose in a specific way, do you think that there are, you know, that the naturally talented performers go to the top, and therefore is that why they go to the top? So is natural talent like the thing, or can people
Hmm.
train that talent to get to the top?
Yeah, I think you can train the talent to get to the top. I think co-regulation is super important, having the right kind of support, the right kind of coach, the right kind
Mm.
of mentor, the right kind of partner. I think that's going to have a big influence. Um, you know, it depends on the context. This is a huge industry, and I think some people are going to book the gig because they are the best at what they do. Some people are going to book the gig because they bring other strengths to the table. And
Okay.
I am a classic example of that. Like I can honestly say I would never have booked a show because I was the best at my craft. I just wasn't. How could I be with 3 years of training? But there were different strengths that I brought to the table, and that's what I used to my advantage. And there were obviously directors, choreographers, whatnot, who it aligned with their vision, and they were willing to take a chance on it. So different people are going to book the gig for different reasons.
Do you think talent is overrated?
Yes, yes,
In
I
what
do,
way?
because I think a focus on talent is can become overrated, because you might be missing consistency, you might be missing grit, you might be missing some of these other factors like likability. There you go.
Talk about that
You
because you've
might be
mentioned it a few
missing,
times. Do
yeah.
tell.
See, you
What,
you might have all the talent in the world and people just do not like you. You're just not a likable person, and that will always become a barrier to success.
right, right, right. That's true. I
So
mean,
you
you
can
get
have all the talent in the world, but if people don't want to work with you, if people don't want to share the space with you, if you are a consumer of energy as opposed to a producer of energy, then you may not get the goal.
Ooh, I like that. Consumer versus producer of energy. Yeah, generate, be a power plant, right? Like of awesomeness. Because it's true, like that happens in the business world. Like you can be really, really good at creating a product or marketing, but if you're actually not a likable person, people aren't going to work with you, and you will always have
Yeah.
a ceiling. 100%.
Yep.
You won't get anywhere. So okay, so can you be? How do you? First of all, how does someone identify if they're not likable? Do they just because you got to have insight to an extent, right? Like, do you look in the mirror and go, "Wow,
Yeah.
I'm such a dick." Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to say that. It's like I'm so likable. Everybody likes me, right? Like, how does somebody identify it?
Yeah. Well, you just kind of said it. I think you have to develop your self-awareness. You've got to develop your social intelligence. You've got to develop your emotional intelligence. These are genuine things to work on.
Mm,
The ability to sort of reflect on a process, or reflect on an audition, or reflect on a competition, or reflect on a conversation or an interaction. You've got to be able to develop those skills in order to understand if you are welcomed or not. Otherwise, like people are sort of stuck in their bubble, stuck in their ego, stuck in their own kind of self concept, and they're not hearing the message.
mm. That's it. Okay, so I've just gone for an audition. I've been rejected. It's like the 10th one. It's like it's the director's fault clearly, and it's everyone else's fault. So I go back to my apartment to my cat, and I'm sitting there and stroking the cat, going, "It's all their fault. What do I, But what do you, as the coach now, have that person do or write down or say to themselves
Mm,
to start to create that sort of introspective moment? Because I found that so many students don't have that self-reflective time for themselves. They
yeah,
just get caught up in the reason it didn't work, right? So what do you say as a
yeah,
coach to help them with that? What's a practical thing they could do or say or write?
yeah. So I think, like that whole concept of journaling after competitions
Oh yeah.
or after auditions is a really good practice. I think through journaling you start to understand yourself, you start to understand the experience, you start to understand um, the others in the
Mm.
experience as well, and sort of maybe you finally get to hear what they said, or you get to finally recognize their idea or their insight or their opinion. um, a good question to ask yourself is, am I playing in the space or am I proving in the space? Because they're very, very different energies. If you're proving in the space, then you might be leaning into terrain where you could become unlikable. If you're playing in the space, then you are open, you are flexible, you're green, you're willing to hear, you're willing to receive, you're willing to adapt, you're willing to change. And that
Mm.
can make people gravitate to you a lot more.
Proving the space. So meaning that well, that's interesting because I'd imagine that'd be a block to performance, right? Because you're not really being present, right? It seems
Yes,
more like your ego takes over and you're trying to prove how good you are rather than actually
yes,
being
yes.
connected to that authentic self you were talking about before,
Yeah,
and being open to the rejection, right? Open to just
yes,
saying, "Here I am. laying it out on the table, take me as I come, and see what happens, right? With that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's spot on. It's, I think a lot of the times when we step into the arena, and that any kind of performance arena, we can very easily move into a position where we begin to prove our worth, prove our talent, prove our value, prove our opinion, or prove our perspective. And, we're not playing, we're not open, we're not willing to receive, we're not willing to listen, we're not willing to change.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I like that a lot because talents have been an interesting thing that I've had to grapple with because I started dancing at 18 as well. So
Wow.
I called myself a dinosaur essentially. So I
Yeah.
dabbled in dancing. Okay, I did a little dabbling when I was in through my teenage years, but I decided to do it quite seriously when I was 18, like yourself when I
Wow.
finished school. And you don't have a lot more time left, so you really have to be smart in how you train and be very strategic in how you apply
Hmm.
yourself. But thankfully, and this is why people should look at what Will teaches and what you actually offer, because I hired a coach when I was 19 that helped me more on the mindset side of things, and I didn't really realize at
Right.
the time that that was going to be for dancing. It was actually more life coaching, right? But it
Yep.
was for 13 months, and so that was better than a degree because at the same I was learning all the
Wow.
technical foundations from one of the best coaches in the world in ballroom dancing, and then I
Yep.
was getting this mindset training on top of it, which would then help with, okay, how do you want that to manifest? What do you want to see happen?
Yep.
Here is how you actually approach it. And so it was a really wonderful blend of the two and lit a fire in my life because I was like, I want to teach this when I finish my career in dancing.
Wow. That's
So
so amazing. Well played, Vaughan. Well
thank
played.
you. But I think what you said before about being congruent is really important. And I've struggled with that a lot with aligning yourself to who you are. But I've always known deep down that I really love coaching and working with people. The vehicle would
Hmm.
change. It would be dancing. That's a way of doing it.
Hmm.
Then there's also coaching, say through workshops or hiring or
Hmm.
working with people one on one. The vehicle changes, but fundamentally it's working with people. And that's what I've always been drawn to. And so I think that to me that helps people and performers learn. When you said stay in your lane, something pricked up to me. I was like, that's good because it's difficult to find your lane to start with, right? That's actually hard. You got to do a lot of trial and error, but very soon you
Yep.
start to figure out like, oh, this is where I should go. And it's tempting to think, oh, I'd like to be like Elon Musk there, but you
There we
can't
go.
really manufacture that. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
that guy's he's himself. He's an anomaly. Okay, cool.
Yep.
What lessons can I learn? But you can't really model and emulate that and be that, right? So
Hmm.
all these sort of lessons, what you're saying, seem to time together very, very well. But starting at 18, you got to be strategic. You got to move forward. You got to go quickly because you don't have a lot of time. And talent is related to this because there's a book called "Talent is Overrated" by Jeffrey Colvin,
Wow.
where he have you heard of this book? Have you heard of the author?
No, I haven't actually.
Definitely a good one to look at because I looked at some of the research that he based his book on, and there's a famous study by Erickson from the 70s where they looked at, I think, the West Berlin Academy of Arts. Don't quote me on that, but you can check it out for yourself. And anyone watching, it's all up on the good old internet. But the point is, this study was where the 10,000 hour rule, I think, sort of came from, and then it got morphed into like just do anything for 10,000 hours, you'll be world class. It
Right.
isn't like that at all. Like for example,
Okay.
I have an accountant. He's definitely had like 20,000 hours in work. He's horrible, right? Like he's not
Yeah.
good. Okay. But he's had
Yep.
like 30,000 hours maybe of work over his lifetime. He's not good. Okay. So,
Yep.
so I always struggle with this 10,000 hour thing. And this research went deeper. It said, no. They looked at violin players. Okay. And they said, what makes people who've committed their life to this one instrument, what makes a good violin player, a better violin player, and the best? What actually are they doing?
Wow.
Because they're all practicing. Okay. They're all at the same level in the sense of practice. They know their scales, they know their chords, they can play
Hmm.
the same songs, right? But what makes that number one violin concerto soloist versus everybody else here studying the same instrument every day? So they would look at how they studied, how they would actually practice, what they would do, the times allotted, who was teaching, all those things. And it sort of came down to a similar, there were patterns, right? So one of the patterns
Hmm.
was the 10,000 hour rule, where many of these people had all practiced for at least 10,000 hours. So there's that. The second thing was that they were getting constant positive feedback almost on a daily
Wow.
basis,
Okay.
right? That's important because they weren't getting and I say this to my students a lot, there's a difference between criticism and critiquing.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
So criticism's like your shit. Critique's like that was shit, right? So in my
Yep.
Australian vernacular, that's an easy way to think of it. So they're getting that feedback, and it was very constructive to help them build forward. They're practicing for 2 to 3 hours per day, virtually every day. Okay, so you can
Wow.
see these patterns emerging, right? It wasn't just 10,000 hours over time. And then a lot of these, the ones that were sort of
Mm.
the best, often started much earlier in their teenage years, right? So they started more at their 10, 11 age, sometimes a bit earlier. The ones that started at, and they had accrued more practice this way by the
Right.
time they were 18. So people who started at 18 were already on a deficit of time. Okay. And so
Yes.
now, then the practice itself, and this is really cool to know, was very specific. So the good players would just actually play the songs. I think the best players would like practice, like warm up and practice, and then they would do their song, and off they go. And I think the best ones would play like a chord or a scale till their fingers like bled, like almost every day. Like they were
Wow.
just
Okay.
obsessive about like just nailing that one thing, right? So they weren't really concentrated as much on the song, so to speak. And again, I'm paraphrasing this from research I did quite a long time ago, but it's interesting, right? Because you can probably yourself, you're thinking, oh, I did a lot of that, right? Or I've
Mm-hmm.
seen singers who were like just working obsessively on some specific thing, but it was sort of counterintuitive. So, I mean, based on that, like, what's going through your head when I share that information with you? What's coming to mind?
Yeah, it's the positive reinforcement. It's the feedback thing. I would have loved to have had a coach. If I had gotten a coach when I was 18 in my first year of dance, actually probably not at 18 because everything was kind of like
Yes.
green. Yeah,
Need to be
everything
ready.
was green in that first year. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes. It's a
you
lot.
have it's different. It's different. It's like a kid with a candy, but maybe in year two and year three, it would have helped to have had a coach. It would have helped to have had someone help me sort of embody the corrections or embody the constructive feedback, but also sort of reinforce me with that. Yeah, with a friendly voice or an encouraging voice or a voice of hope. I think that would have been really, really helpful. I
Mm.
had to find ways to do that myself. Um, and yeah, it's interesting when you said, repeating the step just again and again and again and again and again rather than worrying about the whole choreography. I actually did a lot of that. I did a lot of that because I couldn't handle the whole choreography. So
Mm.
it was really about dissecting the goal into bite-sized chunks and you getting through it at that pace. So there's so much of what you just said that's relevant and applicable.
Well, a lot of one of the parallels that they talked about was like master chess players. Tiger Woods always comes up with the 10,000 hour rule, but he was very noted for like hitting like maybe a couple of at least 1,000, maybe 2,000 balls with like one club, one swing, just really. But the thing is, it's not the action, right? So it's so someone could hear that and say, well, with dancing, so I would often myself
Hmm.
use what I just taught you myself, and then I would experiment with my students and put them in the lab. Off you go, let's see what happens. And the ones that would just repeat routines all the time, horrible, right? They would always develop bad
Yeah,
habits.
well,
They would not
yep,
uh,
yep,
because
that's
and
it.
they wouldn't listen often when I would suggest like do not practice like that. It's not helpful, but you can't help it. You think your brain's like, no, the more I go through it, the better it gets. Like,
Yeah,
no, if you understand the fundamentals of each part of that, it will come together much better. And that's where you've got to be more focused, right? And then, but you can't just do that one element, like going forward and backwards, for example, and just think doing 100 of those a day is what I'm talking about. There's actually a
yeah,
mindset to it. You really have to be quite
yes,
in your body. You have to be aware of your feedback mechanisms in your body, right? So when you're doing it,
yeah,
you're getting a positive feedback loop in your body or a negative. So you're trying to figure out, am I off balance or
yep,
on balance, right? Someone has to also sort of watch you and go, correct this as you do it. So you're being very
yeah,
smart by doing this, not just a workhorse, because again, that can
yes,
become a bad habit, right? So
and that can lead to burnout.
oh, that would definitely lead to, well, also boredom, right? Because honestly, I just found why
Yeah,
most people don't do it. So they just get bored. They're like, I don't want to do that like same step over and over. And it's like, okay, well then just be happy with your results, because I'm promising you, that is what I
Right.
know, that is what those top people are doing. I see them. I've
Right.
worked next to them. I had to compete up against that. They're already world champions when I was 18. I was
Right.
screwed, right? So how do I catch up? And I said, but
Yeah.
that's what they're doing. So be happy with your results, because you're not going to magically just outbeat them, because
Yes.
that's the pattern, right? That's what works. So, I mean, what habits do you know? So you're working with generally like younger teenage age, or are you going to
Yeah,
adults as
so
well, teens?
generally the bulk of my clients would probably be sort of 18 to 26.
Oh, that's okay. That's an
Um,
awesome. This is a great top. What we're talking about is great for that age group too. What are
yeah,
you noticing then when you go into those groups? Being, because we're patterned creatures. People, we
we
have a
are.
program operating right in the way we operate in our brain and our life. So, what are you noticing? Some of the patterns with people that you're like, okay, across the board, that need to shift for people to change their results.
Yeah, there's a lack of patience.
Mm.
The expectations are way too high. Um, yeah, they want to sort of get there too quick, and any setback or any disappointment is kind of perceived as the end of the world, or that's the end of that then. And so, yeah, you realize that there's not a lot of resilience. There's not a lot of um, repair. There's not a lot of uh, staying on purpose and finding meaning in any experience that you've had. There's not a lot of that. And everything is taken very personally. Everything is taken very, very personally. It's actually not about you. It's about the performance.
Oh, that's good. So, is that a form of detachment in a way? Like, how, from all your training in psychology and coaching, because I mean, you sort of, I can understand why people would take it personally. Like, if I wasn't me, I could understand you're putting yourself out there. It's People are
Hmm.
looking at you, they're saying your performance, and you're thinking, I put everything into this. Like, I'm not doing anything else. Is all I do. And you're saying, here you are saying, oh, it's easy for you, Will, not to take it personally. Look where
Yeah,
you are, right? So, but what does it actually mean to not take it personally? Like, on a deeper level, like what actually
yeah.
is happening?
Yeah, so imagine this: every class, every rehearsal, um, every training that you do, you are an observer in the situation. You are open, you are learning, you are taking on board. You're stepping in, you're stepping out, but you're predominantly an observer in the situation until it comes to the performance. And once you are at the performance, then you are in the driver's seat. Then you are in, then you are mindful, then you are committed to the moment, then you are fused. And they're two very, very sort of different approaches because the rehearsal mindset is very much about I can't be so fused or so attached to outcome or so attached to
Mm.
choice that I'm not willing to grow or I'm not willing to move. Whereas when you are in the performance, when you're in the arena for the purpose of performance, it's like I'm in the driver's seat now and I will follow through with any decision that I make. I will commit, I will execute, and then I'll go back to being an observer again.
Mm. So you're saying to sort of have two mindsets to switch between?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep.
Okay, so the first mindset is when you're in rehearsals. Is that the idea?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
It's to
And
be
then
the observer. It's
observer.
to kind of, yeah, be open to feedback, be open to change, be open to direction. Listen and listen some more, and try and fail and practice, because that's what a practice is.
Mm.
But as soon as you step into that sort of the competition, or as soon as you step into go time, then you're in, and you're committed, and it's intentional. It
Mm.
is intentional. And as soon as that's finished, that chapter's done or that segment's done, you go back to being the observer again because you want to learn from what just happened.
That's cool. So I'm hearing that as like, so when you go onto the stage, for example, that's a sort of the space of let go, right? Like
Hmm.
you have to sort of rely on the fact you've done all the work, and then getting out of your head, and like we're talking about Paul, being present, right? Like actually being just letting that sort of happen. I guess honestly, I think that's what draws me to things like this podcast or doing
Hmm.
performances, because you don't quite know if it's going to work out, right? You're
Yeah,
hoping, you know, you got all the training, but sometimes you just forget a line.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what's the saying from Zig Ziglar? He goes, if you set yourself on fire, people will come from miles around just to watch you burn. It's fantastic, right? It's like, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So
true.
what's that saying? It's saying like people just love to see what's gonna happen, right? And
Yep,
you know, if you cry when you make a mistake, that's people don't want to see that. They want to see you. How do you come back from that
that's it.
horrible thing you just did? Like comedy's brilliant for this, right? Because those guys probably forget stuff all the time, but they're so good after honing their craft for so long that they can just work with a crowd. I mean, can you imagine standing on stage and someone heckles you? It's like I can't like it's amazing skill, isn't it, to be able to just
Yeah,
make it work and jive with it in real time, and that's where the beauty comes, right? And I think that's what
yeah,
draws us ultimately to that high, isn't it? Like that feeling of
yeah.
you crushed it, but it wasn't because you
I
were a
think
robot, was it? It's like because you
that's
sort of
it. I think
morphed.
you pinpointed. Yeah, you pinpointed. I've never actually thought that with comedians. Probably the best performance they deliver is the one where they are flexible.
Mm.
They've got to just kind of work with whatever happened. It's a combination probably of being intentional
Yep.
and flexible.
Yeah, I've
There's
heard.
no rigidity there.
I like that word. I mean, we should. We're dancers, right? I like the flexible. But the rigidity, I guess what is hard to see is how much work goes into, say, a comedy act, for example. I know that even guys like Kevin Hart, who are known to be the top in their game, will do so
Hmm.
many little comedy stores throughout the country.
Yep.
I think, what did he say? He did like 200 before he did this big special on net. Either it was either Netflix, it
Wow.
was one of these huge stadiums he did, but he did like 200 of these mini shows to like 30 to 100 people type shows, refining stuff, and he would pay attention to the laughter. He would go back and like maybe watch it again or listen to it again,
Yep.
and where the big spikes were, he would use that, and then he would delete the rest, and it was just this insane refinement. And then to get to a
Wow.
point where it's sort of stage worthy, and then they look so natural. Just walk out and they're so funny. It's like you don't realize the science, the toil, right?
Yeah.
Behind
Wow. Yeah.
behind the closed doors, and this is what I
Yep.
love to hear about, because is it the talent that did that? It was like when you really look at how much work they have done in years of performing in that area, it is not the talent gets you to the door to go into the club, right?
Yep. Yep.
At that point, you sort of get separated. I liked before this idea of the patient's expectations and setbacks. It's so normal, isn't it? Like within the youth of today, the youth of today, you know, they've
Yeah.
impatient. Oh, if only I was young again. But they want it all now. I
This
get that.
it's that thing of like instant gratification. It's not going to happen straight away. It's not going to happen when you want it to happen. There's a process. There's a timing to these things, and you have to allow the evolution to occur. You have to allow the growth to occur. You have to allow the success to come and go. This idea of like, practicing once and getting it, or getting it once and then expecting to get it every time.
Mm.
It's just there's so much emphasis around this gratification and not a lot of room for vulnerability, and I think that's a real flaw.
Mm. Mm. Not a lot of room for vulnerability, which seems ironic for performing arts, right? Where being vulnerable is like one of the most important things to try to be. And I struggle with that. You know, I understand how difficult that can be, because you want to rely on your skill or technical prowess, but you got to give up that a lot when you go on stage, and rely
Mhm.
on what you've trained. What's the saying? You don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your preparation, right? And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's a good one from, I think that's from the Navy SEALs. It's very good because it
Wow.
makes a lot of sense, right? Because you I know personally, especially as an amateur, I was always like these magic moments were going to happen for me just out of nowhere in the moment,
Yeah.
in the most important pivotal point of my competing. All of a sudden, I was just going to be good, right? No,
Yeah.
I was worse like every time, because I didn't rise to the occasion. I fell back on my level of preparation, and I was like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
it took 10 years to understand that, but I get it now. So, um, with people's I suppose expectations, because this is a funny
Mm.
one, right? Because what does that mean? Like, what are people's expectations typically? Are they out? Are there some people just thinking unrealistically? Like, what do you? What does it mean to
Yeah, I think
you know?
some people, have this this need, this underlying need to be wanted, to be appreciated, to be valued, to be accepted everywhere you go, and it just doesn't happen like that. I think there will be rooms where you feel you are welcome, and there will be rooms where you are not. The important thing to do as performers, or the important thing to do as leaders, business owners, all of that sort of stuff is, to continue trying to find your tribe and to keep going where you are wanted, because that's where the success will happen, as opposed to thinking that everybody will love you and everybody will see you the way that you want to be seen.
Mm. Yeah, so you're sort of setting yourself for a bit of disappointment there, right? Because especially in such a cutthroat
Yeah.
industry,
Yep.
so then okay, this is a question I always want to know: how do you know when to quit?
Okay, it's a good one. Okay. So I think there's a difference between operating from instinct and operating from trauma.
Oh,
Operating from instinct is knowing, is an insightful or a deep knowing of when there is no longer an effort reward balance, of when it's the good outweighs the bad, when it doesn't align with your values anymore. I think when you operate from intuition, you can recognize that. When you operate from trauma, it's that thing of like, I need everybody to like me. I need to be wanted everywhere I go. I need to feel powerful. I need to have status. I need to have recognition. So they're very, very different places of operation. So, I think if you can learn to operate from intuition, um, you will know, because you're not requiring external validation, or there's nothing around that decision that comes from outside. It's, you understand internally that, what, it's been fun and it was good for as long as it lasted, and I'm happy to move on, and I'm happy to turn my creativity elsewhere.
I love that. And the struggle I have with that is, if you heal your trauma, are you going to be more motivated or less to keep going?
I think healing trauma creates a sense of freedom, because you become far less reactive
Mm.
and far more responsive to what's in front of you. And if you're responsive to what's in front of you, you see the opportunities, you see the doors, you see the windows, you see where you are wanted, you see where there are gaps in ideas, and you create as a result of that. I think healing trauma is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves, because we're no longer stuck in our past, and we are now on purpose, but a purpose that is directed forward.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't saying like stay in trauma, people, if it's working. Like, I was
Well, I
more.
mean, but for some people it does.
Yeah,
For
well,
some, like that's
I was making the observation because I
yeah,
know there are lots of
the
business
tortured
owners,
artist. You know that
tortured art.
philosophy, the
Oh
tortured.
yes, yes. And if you give up that identity, are you going to lose like a power, so to speak?
There we
You
go.
know,
Yep,
um,
yep.
and so
Will my
hence,
performance suffer?
yeah, yeah. Will my performance suffer? And it's a legitimate concern. Like, I know I've got trauma I'm still dealing with, and
Hmm.
I'm working with a psychologist at the moment, and we talk about these things. So many parallels between all of this. Like, no, it's really interesting to me because it's not isolated. You're not just performing artist. That's it, dancer. Like, no,
Hmm.
you are multifaceted, and it all comes together. And so that's something I actually was posing to him. I was like, if you deal with these issues, are you going to
Mm.
just be less attached to outcome, which is good, obviously, I think. And so, what do you then do? Because do you become like just chilled out dude now? like what ends
Right,
up
right,
happening,
right.
right? Like, because the
Yeah,
sense of freedom you have is great. Like that sounds liberating and
yeah.
awesome. But do you lose an essence of yourself that was also pushing you to? Because there is some
Yes. Okay, I hear you.
validity in proving people wrong. There's something
Yep.
good at what Freudenheimer or what the hell the Germans call the brain, where you get reward for like. Well, that's when you see someone fail. That's a different thing. I was making the
Yeah.
wrong observation. But do you know what I'm saying? Like about the moving
I
forward,
do, I do.
the moving
I
forward. Like, are
think
you going to lose a part
we're
of
getting
yourself if you
nerdy here. We're
get
getting a bit
nerdy?
nerdy here, but
Mm.
I think there's a difference between being with your trauma and being in your trauma.
Mm.
I think when you are in your trauma, you are stuck and rigid. When you are with your trauma, you find meaning and you remain flexible.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, say that again. That's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, the difference between being in your trauma, which means you become stuck and reactive and rigid, or being with your trauma, which is understanding its positive intention, understanding its messaging, being able to integrate those parts and move them forward with you.
Yeah, that is super powerful to know. That's super powerful because I think yeah, on the other side of that, you could probably birth an entirely different type of creativity too,
Mm-hmm.
within yourself, right? Um,
Absolutely,
mm,
absolutely.
mm. That's very powerful. I like that. Do you find a lot of people go into performing arts because they are, you know, heavily traumatized
Yeah,
as an outlet, right?
uh,
Because it's super creative, right? So,
I
but do you
think
find you have to deal
so.
with that a lot?
Like everyone's going to have their opinion about it, but like think of it. If you suffer a fear of abandonment and you put yourself into an industry where you are constantly being rejected, then there's a yearning there. There's something that you're trying to rewrite, or there's something that you're trying to reauthor. You've probably chosen the toughest industry to do it in, but it's almost as though like the fear of being abandoned and the need of being wanted is the reason for stepping into the audition room.
Oh, dude, this is
For going
great.
for the gig.
Mm,
So I think so. I think like trauma is different things for different people, and there are different kinds of traumas. But I think we all have some trauma to a degree, even if it's just an emotional one, as performers, because we want to be wanted, we want to be appreciated, we want to be valued, and we want to be adored. We want to be loved.
mm.
So
I love that
do I think?
correlation, abandonment and then valid acceptance, right? Like you've got
Yeah,
that. I've never. That's cool to think about, but it's like, wow, yeah, you've definitely selected a very difficult place to
yeah,
muddle your way through
absolutely.
if you're trying to get that.
Yeah. So the
Mm.
answer is yes.
Mm. Well, I guess do you deal with that say in workshop settings, or do you do that more in like one-on-one coaching, or do you deal with that
Both,
generally, or
yeah,
yeah?
both. I mean, in one-on-one coaching, we would. So I do my coaching is trauma informed. So that's actually what I do. I do trauma informed coaching, and so we kind of want to get to the root cause of why you need this, or why you need that, or why this is a pattern for you, or why you have that default response. We want to get to the core of that. But and in workshops, I also touch upon that too. But I think that's a real issue, is that a lot of creative people, a lot of artists don't want to deal with their trauma, and so it will forever haunt you, and it will forever be a barrier or a block. And it's a real shame, because I think once you're at peace with that, then you can move forward with a lot of hope and a lot of purpose.
Dude, that's great. So what then is the correlation between mental health then and performance?
That's a good question, and I'm going to throw a bit of a pivot here. It's not so much about mental health. I think it's more about emotional health.
Hmm.
I think we get lost when we talk about mental health, because mental health is actually emotional health. Yeah. Let me sort of put it this way.
Mhm.
If you don't feel loved, if you don't feel safe, that's the biggest one. If you don't feel safe in a space, if you don't feel safe in your skin, if you don't feel safe with other people, you're going to develop a lot of coping mechanisms. You're
Mhm.
going to develop things like depression or anxiety or imposter syndrome or body preoccupation as a way to cope with that instability or that gap, you know? Um, and so if we can start working on people's emotional health, I think it will start having a knock on effect on people's mental health. And we will see less of a need for coping mechanisms like anxiety, depression, and all that sort of stuff, because people can bounce back, people can self regulate, people can repair, um, either on their own or with the right kind of support.
Okay, there's so much there. This is awesome because like I can understand that from a dancer's perspective, and I'm looking at it from myself as a coach and also working with other people where I've fucked up so many times with students. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I do come from a loving place, but I am imperfect. Like, I don't yell at people, I don't scream at them, I don't abuse them, but I'm honest, man, and I'm sometimes honest in
Mm-hmm.
a really fundamentally flawed way because I've had people just ghost me as a teacher, they just not come
Yep.
back. And it's like, and I would always say, look, my door is open, but if you don't like what I'm saying to you, or if you don't like how I'm coaching you, you
Mm-hmm.
need to have the dialogue with me. But people
Yeah.
don't. And what I think that
Mm-hmm.
ends up doing it doesn't help any situation. Like, right, like fundamentally, I was trying to operate from a place of lay things on the table, and then if you
Mm-hmm.
can come back to me if there's any issues with what we're discussing, what we're doing, that would move things forward in a positive way, right? So, but then people
Mm-hmm.
don't often the time, and is that because of like poor coping mechanisms, or is
I think
do
people
you know what I
rely
mean,
on
or
their protective
overstepping
pattern.
boundaries, or like, do you know what I mean? Like, so because it's complicated,
Yeah.
like we're complicated people, like people are coming to learn to
Mm-hmm.
dance, but then it can become, I don't know. So what do you think with that type of predicament with between say,
Yeah.
uh, hmm,
I think people rely on their protective patterns, on the patterns that they've developed to remain safe in life, or to get what they've needed or what they've wanted. And so, for example, being agreeable, being overly agreeable, saying yes, a yes man, or or a yes person, saying yes to everything, that is a protective pattern, because by doing that, you received love, or you received acceptance, or you received belonging.
oh, okay, okay,
And so, yeah, think of it, when you're working with a client, that sort of client coach relationship, that client's going to have a lot of protective patterns that they've developed in their life experience previous to arriving to you, in order to have had their needs met. And so then when you put them in an environment where you say to them, you are allowed to speak up, you're allowed to have a voice, you are allowed to disagree,
yeah, disagree.
that may feel very, very foreign to them.
So
So
that comes down to
the
personalities too, right? Like you've got
yeah,
agreeable, disagreeable scale, so to speak, and
yeah,
open, conscientious, those sorts of things. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, because I've certainly learned through trial and error, uh, you can pick disagreeable people much easier in that sense. Like you can tell, and
mm-hmm,
that's where it can get a bit disconcerting. So I'm looking at that from a coach's perspective because you want the best
mm-hmm,
for people. You want to try and draw the best out of them, and you will do it imperfectly as a coach for sure. So what are some
mm-hmm,
ways that you can help people if you've identified maybe they're too agreeable, and it's going to come back at you if they, because they're saying yes to everything that deep down they disagree with you, like on what you're saying, and then they go home and like, he's such a dick. Like, so, um,
yeah,
what are some ways that you can work
yep,
with that? Do you know what I mean? Like to
yeah,
because I've failed at that before, and I'm like, and it bugs me because I'm like, I've worked with some really wonderful people, and then and for a long time, like sometimes years, and then it just comes to an abrupt end. It's like, that was
yeah,
not cool, and that's life. I get that. That's business, but what are
yep.
some ways that could sort of help nurture places, going forward that makes it better, right? Like for people.
Yeah. I think it's when you arrive at a place of vulnerability or a place of uncomfortability, if a certain situation makes you feel uncomfortable, I think the key is in understanding and in learning that it may be necessary for you to go through that or surf through that to heal a part of you that's stuck so that that situation is no longer a barrier anymore. And so, what I mean by that is
Mm.
if you have it on the tip of your tongue that you want to say something to someone, you know, I don't like the way that you're speaking to me, or I don't like the way that you're addressing me right now, or I don't like, you know, your choice of language, and you keep holding back, that is a pattern that will continue to reoccur until you heal the part of you that is scared to speak up.
Mm.
And so it's about learning to, I need to do this. This is more than just a goal achievement. This speaking my mind, or saying, sharing my concern, or not answering back, but kind of like, you know, asserting myself here is something that I actually need to do in order to heal the part of me that's stuck there so that this no longer becomes an issue.
That's cool.
That's what I would say for the client who feels as though they were spoken at, yeah,
Yeah.
um, and who go home and kind of have that feeling of like, oh, you know, like, I can't believe I accepted that, or I can't believe, you know, I didn't speak up. It's like, well, you've just recognized something, so teach yourself or get the support that you need to be able to sort of go back into an experience like that and do the thing that's uncomfortable for you to do. And for coaches, you know, myself included, it's like, you know, I've had clients who don't come back anymore after a session or whatnot. And so, you know, for me, a part of that healing is having the courage to maybe go back to the client and say, look, I just, you know, before we kind of go our separate ways, I just want to check in with you, and I just sort of want to find out what it was here that created the rupture. And being open to that feedback, that if that client comes back to me and says, well, I don't like the way that you speak to me, or I don't like your choice of communication, or I don't like how overbearing that you are, to be able to take that on board and sit with that and kind of embody that. um, but asking a client why can be a difficult thing sometimes. And
Mm.
so for me, it's, you know, it's a part of me that I have to heal, is having the courage to go back to someone and say, um, I'd love some feedback here. What can you tell me?
Yeah,
And then
that's
being okay with that feedback.
no, that's great because that's sort of like what we were saying at the beginning. Fundamentally, it's like applying almost the performing mindset about getting rejected and
Yep,
dealing with the disappointment and the grief in a
that's it.
context of a coaching relationship, so to speak, or a you know, just a human relationship, really.
Hmm.
Even though it's a different dynamic, it's just being open to that, and that's actually very helpful because yeah, it's so personal what you do when you coach people in a way, because it's not like you're selling a pen, okay, to
Yeah,
an
yeah,
unknown entity. You're
yeah,
invested, and there's a vested interest there in seeing someone succeed, right?
yeah.
So, and again, it's I guess it's good for anyone who is a coach or a teacher or upcoming to understand that. Like, what was the word you used before? It was not detaching yourself, but sort of like observing it, I suppose. Like using
Hmm.
that analogy is, or that way of being is good in that context too, I think, because it
Hmm.
often isn't you. I found it's the idea. Like sometimes it can be what the way you've presented yourself, or the way you've presented an idea,
That's
or the
it.
way you've presented feedback, but it's not like they don't know everything about you. Like this is the thing about rejection. Like when
That's
you're
it.
getting rejected from dancing and didn't make it through a round, you get rejected from a director, they don't know you. Like,
You don't know the whole story.
right.
Yeah, you don't know
Right.
the whole
It's
story.
it's the
Yeah.
idea that they're saying no to, and that always
Hmm.
helped me with certain things in sales, for example, when I was in a different industry. I had to constantly train myself. It's not you they're saying no to, and I'd be like,
Right.
I hate this rejection thing, but I'd go back out again, drag myself with our knuckles on the ground,
Yeah.
and be like, it's not you, it's the idea, right? And it's where they're at, and it's just not aligning at the moment. It
That's
isn't
it.
actually you. Now, it may be sometimes. Sometimes, like you just don't get on with people. Okay, and maybe
Yeah.
they call you an F face, whatever. But
Yeah.
that's their stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah,
right? Like, so it's
yeah.
not it's that helped me a tremendous amount. So I guess you've helped. Will, this has been great because you've really helped reframe a
Mm.
lot of things for myself, but
Okay.
also I know for the audience. So, are there any last sort of moment thoughts you can think of for the people you work with? You're like, oh, this is something people got to know. Like, they have to know. What are some like things that they can take away on top of all this outstanding information you've given them that will help them reach that sort of next stage in their journey?
Yeah. Um, okay, here's one. I'm a big believer in the fact that anything that is truly meant for you will not pass you by.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think life is about suffering at times, and life is about disappointment at times, and life is about frustration at times. And we have to learn to move forward from that. As far as sort of creatives are concerned, or performing artists, we put ourselves on the line time and time and time and time again with the hope that we will book the gig or book the comp or book the award or whatever that might be. But if we can remind ourselves that we don't know our story in such black and white terms, and there's no certainty there. So if we can remain open and understand that anything that's not meant for you, or anything that's meant for you, that is meant for your journey or your learning or your growth or your next level, anything that's meant for you will not pass you by. We can let go of the other stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm gonna leave it there. That's perfect. All right. So I appreciate your time, Will, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Check out MrWillCenturion.com and his content and his programs. Thank you for your time, Will. That
Thank
is
you so much.
perfect.
This has been such an amazing conversation. I'm so, so grateful. Thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome.